Okay. Can you hang this out, please?
Yes.
Thanks so much. Okay. So these are the 10 cards for everyone.
Okay. For them to
Markers.
write their names.
Yes, the pocket constitution for everyone.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Good one. Okay. Just everyone just one of these.
Yeah.
You can just pass me on the rows for easier.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Through the entirety of the Declaration of Independence from 1776, the Articles of Confederation ratified in 1781, and the Constitution signed in 1787 and adopted in 1788. These are the three foundational organic documents of our government. I assume you know nothing, which is generally a good assumption to make. You know more, that's wonderful, but I assume you know nothing. So Adi's handing out, please write your name in big letters. My vision is decreasing as years go by. So just big letters, please write your name with the markers. Whatever you want me to call you, I don't care, just put there and that's what I'll call you. Also, the Constitution, bring this to class every day, please. Keep it close to your heart, like I do. Keep it in your pocket if you wish. Anyway, okay, so let's start. Everyone knows the 4th of July, and maybe you've heard of the Declaration. Whoever has actually read it, cover to cover? I see no hands. Okay, that's it, right. The purpose of the Declaration of Independence is to establish a legal memo, and I'll prove it to you. It was to justify the causes of separation between the United States and Britain. It's a memo making a legal argument. What are the causes which the separation? There it goes. The causes that impel them. Right? There's no uniform revolutionary code. Instead, they're appealing to a different kind of law. Law of nature, and if nature is God. What is this natural law? We'll talk about this more this semester. It begins with the most famous lines perhaps ever written. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they're endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, among these life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. What does unalienable mean? From property to alienate means to give away. These rights are bartered. But of course, there's a contradiction. Did the government treat all men equally? Of course not. Women alike. But this was aspirational in many senses, that by their God, they were themselves created equally. And then was the purpose of government? To protect these rights by the consent of the governed. But what happens when government's destructive for these ends? In other words, when government fails to protect these rights, what happens? The people have the right to alter or to abolish that government and create a new one to affect their happiness. This is a legal memo. It's saying the rule and telling you what happens if the rule is not going to be followed. Okay. Now, we don't just have a revolution for any reason at all. We have it for serious reasons to justify, not light and transient causes. But when there's a long train of abuses and usurpations, that's really bad, usurpations. You don't want a usurpation. When there's a usurpation, okay, when you have this long train of abuses, where'd my thing go? There we go. Is the right of people to throw off and start a new government altogether. Okay. Now they explain, we've been suffering. We've been waiting. The king's done all these bad things. And we can wait no longer. The king of England has injured us and created an absolute tyranny. All right. So if you could just flip on the backside, write your first name really big. I can't see a lot of these. A lot of you wrote your names really small. I can't read these. My vision's fading. So just on the backside, just first name real big. Here comes the memo. Let these facts be submitted to a candidate. What comes next is a list of grievances, like Festivus, right? What are you angry at? What's making you upset? Number one, I have a number of these too. The king has refused to pass laws which are necessary for our people. He has forbidden the governors from passing laws. He suspended the laws. The colonists could not pass their own laws without the king's assent, and the king withheld that assent. He has denied them the right to representation. If there's no taxation without representation, you've heard this, right? People cannot govern themselves. Number four, where does the legislature meet? Far, far away in England, distant from the people. Number five, he has dissolved, that is, taken away our own houses of government and put others in those places. Number seven, what does that mean? If the king didn't like the way you ruled in a case, bye-bye. The judges were not independent. They depended on the king's will. That's why our judges in our system have lifetime tenure. They depend on no one. Indeed, they do not. He has created all these new offices which harass our people. These are the tax collectors that would go and search people's possessions. He has kept standing armies. Think today of the armies as a great thing, right? Go army, right? But back in the day, this was a very dangerous idea. A standing army in times of peace was used only to oppress the people. Oh, by the way, sign in on the clicker. I forgot to mention that, please. Thank you. He has made the military under his will solely dependent upon him. They were not tried here. Government. He suspended our legislatures and abdicated our government here. Sorry about that. Zoom, you are not with me today. Okay. Okay, please be on time. Thanks. Okay. He has plundered our seas, ravaged our coasts. He sent foreign mercenaries. These were trained, paid soldiers. They were not British, they were Hessian, they were Germans, to fight against the Americans. He's taken our people captive in the high seas. This is actually dangerous. If you were a sailor in the high seas and you were captured, you were basically forced, you were drafted into the military, the British Navy. It was extremely risky. Thank you. This one is always gets a comment. He's brought the merciless Indian savages. Very often the English would pay the natives to basically attack the colonists. Now here comes the conclusion, right? We have the issue, we have the rule, the analysis. This is the conclusion. This is where it sort of brings it all together. We have petitioned, we have asked the king, please, in humble terms, stop this oppression. But they call the king a tyrant, unfit to be the ruler of a free people. This may not seem like a big deal to you, but back then to call the king a tyrant, you were signing your death sentence. You were signing your death sentence. To call the king a tyrant meant that you were likely to be executed. So this Revolutionary War sounds great because we know how it turned out, right? But at the time, they didn't know what would happen. They were willing to put their lives on the line. They've waited. We've appealed to the justice, their common kindred, because these were all British people. These were them rebelling against their own. Appealing to the supreme judge of the world. That's not John Marshall, right? It's not John Roberts. God, right? They're appealing to a higher authority to justify this separation from England. And this is one of my favorite sentences in the entire document. Read this one carefully. That these united colonies are and of right ought to be free and independent states. Look at that. In one sentence, they go from colonies to states. You see that? You think word limits are tough? Imagine writing the Declaration in a couple pages, right? So much, I'm serious, so much is packed into just a few words. It's really a remarkable document. Thomas Jefferson wrote it, helped by Ben Franklin and John Adams, some of the very great people. All political connections are totally dissolved. It's like a divorce. We're through, right? We're done. We're out. Leave us alone. And then as free states, what can they do? They can wage war. You see, England called this a civil war. We call this revolution. You see the difference, right? In England, these are just a bunch of people uprising against their government. And America's like, no, 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 you're not our government anymore. We're on our own. It's a very important thing. Whether something's a civil war or revolution depends who wins. Look at our own American Civil War. It was not a revolution. Think about that for a minute. And they conclude peace, contract alliances, and establish commerce. And this is the part at the end where they realize, okay, if this doesn't work out, we're all going to die, right? For the support of this protection of divine providence, each other are for away, and sacred honor, which follows our 56. The most famous one is John Hancock, right? Big letters. You've probably seen it in your history books, hopefully. He's saying, all right, come king, come at me, right? I'm ready. They put their names, so this was not anonymous. All right, declaration down. Next. So what happens after 1776? The United States starts a war. A miracle, maybe, providence, whatever you want to call it. The Americans prevailed. They formed alliances with France and other nations that provided reinforcement. You see, the French didn't really like the Americans, but they hated the Brits. They hated the Brits. So what ended up happening is that the French supported America and provided just enough support to prevail. And as this new country was forming, they started developing a government called a confederation. Now, you've probably heard of the Confederacy. This is the word which a lot of you have heard. It's, the Civil War. This is not the Confederacy. This is the Confederation. Now, what's a confederation? A confederation is a group of states that are sort of loosely connected, but there's not sort of one supreme governor to rule over all of them. Oh, can you just pass them some markers? I can't read the pen. Yeah, over there. Whoever has markers, just send them that way. Thank you so much. Yeah, my eyes just don't work anymore like they used to. I used to need, when I started, I did not have glasses. Trust me, you'll get. Any of you don't have glasses yet, you will. Trust me. Eventually happens to us all. So in 1777, the Continental Congress started drafting what's called the Articles of Confederation. This was a early government to sort of define what this new nation would look like. And it wasn't even adopted until 1781, almost towards the end of the Revolutionary War. And if you notice, it's signed, it begins, delegates of the states. This wasn't a single nation. These were individual states that sent delegates to this national government. Okay? And they describe this as Articles of Confederation and Perpetual Union. What does perpetual mean? Forever, right? Forever and ever and ever and ever. Wishful thinking, perhaps, right? They thought it would last forever. Did it last forever? No, it did not. Barely lasted 7 years. But they were hopeful, right? It's like, let's hope this lasts forever. Didn't quite pan out. And here comes the style or the name, the United States of America, the United States. Now, we always say the United States of America is my home, right? The land I love is my home. That is, there's one United States. But that wasn't how they viewed it. This wasn't the United States of America is. It was the United States of America are, plural. These were states that were united in the continent. You ever knew that before? So the States of America are, they were plural, not singular. It wasn't until much later it became a singular phrase. Keep that in mind. And the core of this new confederation, were the states. The states retained their powers unless it was given to the national government. And just think about this for a minute. What does it mean for the states to form a national government? They're giving up some of their own powers and giving to this other body, but they're keeping everything else. So unless something was expressly delegated to the Confederation, it was retained by the states. This is in the 10th Amendment we'll get to in a bit. How do you allocate power between the national government and the state government? It's a question we will study for many, many, many weeks to come. They describe this confederation as a firm league of friendship. Friendship? Imagine New York and New Jersey, oh yeah, we're just friends, right? The purpose is to have common defense and secure their liberties. and to assist against force. So the purpose of this government was to basically say, all right, most of the states, you kind of keep doing what you're doing unless it may be some of a national scope. Okay? And how to better secure these friendships. People can pass between the states. They're not artificial barriers between the states. They have ingress and egress. They can come and they can go. Imagine if New York started putting taxes on New Jersey goods. You can't have trade. Okay? What about criminals who that we return from one state to the next? It's full faith and credit. You probably say this in contracts, maybe. In New York, can be enforced in New Jersey? Yes. Someone gets married in Virginia, is that a valid marriage in Pennsylvania? Yes. Full faith and credit of all records and courts are valid. Okay. Now, we know today our Congress is a House and a Senate, right? It's based on population. Not in the Articles of Government. There was one House, Congress, that's it. And how many votes did each state get? Uno, one. So a big state like Virginia and a tiny state like Delaware had the same amount of representation. That was a problem. And states had multiple delegates, but the delegates can be sent to the capital and then recalled if they didn't behave well. So really the states controlled how their state was represented in Congress. Okay? So there were no less than 2, no more than 7 delegates, and there's only one vote. Each state maintains its own delegates, and each state shall have only one vote. This proves extremely problematic because the small states could basically hold hostage the bigger states, and nothing got done. You needed almost all the states to buy into things, and they couldn't get the big and the small states to agree. There's this phrase, freedom of speech and debate. The notion that if you're in Congress, you can't be punished by the states for what you say in Congress. Okay? Now, there's some things the states could not do. It was clear enough the states could not engage in foreign policy. That is, New York could not send an ambassador to France that might contradict with what the American ambassador might say. Foreign policy is reserved for the national government. States could also not enter into treaties with other states or other foreign countries. That would be very problematic. States could not tax each other. That would also be extremely problematic. States could not have vessels of war and navy. They were allowed to have, though, the militia. We think today, man, the army. But back then, all able-bodied men were in the militia. Sorry, ladies, not you, but all able-bodied men, you were in the militia. Congratulations. And if you were called to service, you had to show up with your rifle. This was how the Revolutionary War was fought. There was no standing army. States could not engage in war unless actually invaded. Usually I skip over the provision, but there's a... Come back next week. We'll talk about the invasion clause in about 9 days or so. Just bear with this one. You'll hear about it very soon. Letters of marque and reprisal. You know what this is? A letter of marque and reprisal. This is kind of cool. This is basically a license to be a pirate, right? The government gives you permission to go and to take a ship. Right? You basically have a license to be a pirate. It's kind of cool. States cannot get them. There's a lot of pirates, though, right? If you did have pirates in your waters, you could have a navy. Piracy was a very big Pirates of the Caribbean, right? You know, Captain Hook. No, this was actually a very dangerous threat in the day. Okay. Military was generally appointed by the states, but there was a problem. How was the national government supposed to get money? How? You need money, right? They could issue what's called a requisition, basically a request to the states. Do you think the states always paid the requisitions? No, sir. No, ma'am. They did not. The government was going bankrupt. No one was paying their dues. Or some states, and the other states didn't pay, then the one that paid got mad. Like, wait a minute, why am I paying all this? So the charges of war, huge. Okay. Now, what were the powers of Congress? Congress could send ambassadors, negotiate treaties. Now, Congress could do a letter of marque. Be a pirate, go to Congress. Congress also appoint courts for trying piracies and felonies. Again, this makes me like, who cares about piracies? This was a big issue. If a ship was seized in the high seas, what happened to it? You needed special courts to deal with the booty, with the stuff that you can't, the booty, right? The stuff that you captured on the boat. What about conflicts over land, right? What if there was a boundary dispute? The national government had the power to appoint courts to settle these boundary disputes. This was really long. Okay. This one may seem stupid, but standards of weights and measures. That way, a pound in New York is the same thing as a pound in Massachusetts. You think, who cares? You want to do you need to have what a pound means, what a foot means, how much rope you're selling. You can't have arbitrary measures. Okay. Affairs with Indians, right? It would fall to the national government generally to regulate the affairs with the Indians. Also, post offices. This was really important. Executive branch. There was no executive branch. Congress was in charge. Congress was in charge, and you only had a president of the legislature who had no real powers. Anyone know that? Anyway, you can press your friends. Okay, and this bit, how they can only make requisitions from the states, but they couldn't actually mandate they pay the money. Big states and small states did not agree. Very little got done. Okay. Okay. So Canada, the 51st state, right? Don't laugh. Read. The Articles of Confederation, which kind of remain in effect, kind of say that Canada, you can join a confederation. You got a fast pass, right? Other territories, not so much. So if Alberta wants to become the 51st state, they can cite this. Being mostly serious. You're not laughing. You should be. Okay. You'll figure me out pretty soon. Okay. Now, this part is kind of, would that happen? No. So during the 1780s, it became very clear that the articles were not working out. Just not that into you, right? Was not working out. And some members of the states met in a convention in Philadelphia. And the purpose of this convention was to propose amendments, changes to the Articles of Confederation. But to that, they drafted a whole new constitution. But wait a minute, Josh, you just told me to amend the Articles of Confederation, you must have all the states consenting to it. Did all the states consent to the Constitution? Not right away. So there's an argument. You ready for this? I'll blow your mind the first day of class. Ready? There's an argument that the Constitution is unconstitutional. What? Right? That the Constitution itself was not adopted with unanimous consent of the states. Instead, it was ratified by the people, not the states, conventions of the states. So the delegates to the Philadelphia Convention were like, yeah, this article, it's not working out. Let's just start from scratch. And let's draft an entirely new, also like this, the other one keeps flaking out just like this, entirely new constitution, okay? An entirely new constitution. Again, the delegates started meeting in April, May of 1787. And they finished the document in September. So instead of 3 or 4 months, they wrote the entire Constitution. Can you do this? It was a remarkable assembly. I think never before in the world history has there been such a concentration of thought about government, about freedom and law in just in one body. And their debates are all recorded, debates how accurate they are, but they're all recorded. And we have the final document, right? You can fit it in your pocket, and you should, right? Everything's in here. So I have now an hour and 30 minutes, so I can do this. Okay. The preamble is the part that people often quote, but they don't realize it's not actually part of the Constitution. It's part of the Constitution, but it has no legal effect. Like you can't go to court and say, Your Honor, this violates the preamble, right? That's not a thing. People have tried over the years. It hasn't really worked out. But I want you to just contrast it. It's we the people of the United States, not we the states, Virginia, New York, and so on. It's we the people of the United States. And what's the goal? To form a more perfect union. Not that it's perfect now, it's far from it. Wasn't then, isn't now. But it's a goal, aspirational, to establish justice, ensure tranquility, and secure the blessings of liberty for ourselves and our posterity, our children. That's the goal of the Constitution, and it states it very clearly in this preamble, which has been cited a million times over the years. The Constitution has 7. You also remember this one. Article is the powers of the presidency. Article 3 is the power of the judiciary. Article 4 concerns the relationship between the states. Article 5 is how you amend or change the Constitution. And 6 or 7 have some hodgepodge provisions that aren't terribly important for now. But definitely have to know the 3 branches of government, right? Legislative, executive, judicial. Correspond to Article 1, Article 2, Article 3. It's very easy to remember, right? 1, 2, 3. Executive. Damn it. 1, 2, 3. Legislative, executive, judicial. See, I psyched myself out. I'm trying to be all cocky in the first class, and I messed up. By the way, if I make a mistake, you need to correct me. There are no one above mistakes here. I make them all the time, and always call me out because I will make them, I promise. If someone says, I will not make a mistake, that's their first mistake. Okay, so let's start. Article 1, Section 1 establishes Congress. What's Congress? In the Articles, it was just one house. Here we have 2 houses, the Senate and the House of Representatives. And what do they have? The legislative powers. And what kind of legislative powers? The powers that are granted. That is, the powers granted in the Constitution. They don't have just unlimited powers like the king might have had. They have the powers that are listed or enumerated. You know this word, enumerated?
Can I ask a question, or should I wait till the end?
Just wait, I can't answer questions, sorry. Enumerated means, usually I love questions, not today. Enumerated means the powers that are listed. Okay, they're herein granted. What does that mean? We'll spend about half a semester on this concept, not joking. Okay, next. Article 1, Section 2. The House is the body with more people, represents the people. It's chosen every second year by the people. So 2-year terms, elections for the House. Okay, Senate, 6-year terms, House is 2-year terms. And who gets to vote? Based on state law. If you can vote for your own legislature state, you can vote for United States Congress. What are the qualifications to be in the House? 20, congratulations, will be a constitutional birthday. When you're in 20, 30 for the Senate, and 35 for the presidency. I'm old, I have no more birthdays left for the Constitution. I have some coming up soon. When I have my first constitutional birthday, I'm so happy. Okay, not that I'll be in Congress, Lord help them. This one, let's just jump right into it. So this is a provision that's not well understood at all, the 3/5 clause. You've probably heard of it. Maybe you've not understood it well. So here's how it worked. There are 2 concepts. Taxation, representation, right? Representation means you count for government. The more people that live in your state, the more members of Congress you have. Okay, everyone get that? But also, the more people you have, the more taxes you're going to pay. It's kind of a double-edged sword. As your population increases, you pay more taxes. Okay, that makes sense. So how does this work? The southern states had a lot of people there, but many of them were slaves. A huge chunk of their population were slaves. So what does that mean? When you're counting population for the South, Virginia, North Carolina, Georgia, they would have more members in Congress. So the Southerners said, we want you to count all of our slaves as full people. Did you know that? The Southerners, they said, we want all of our people counted. They can't vote, right? They get no rights, but they count for a population. We get more votes in the House. You know what that means also? More electoral votes for the president. There's a reason why almost all the early presidents were Southerners. There's a reason why. Because the Southern states have more votes because of slavery. So the 3/5 clause was saying, wait a minute, the Southerners wanted all representation, but the Northerners said, no, we don't want any. In other words, if you're not giving your people the right to vote, you don't count at all. So it's the opposite of what you might have thought. The 3/5 clause said, fine, we'll count slaves partially. It's an appalling concept. It was actually designed to actually make Southern states less powerful. And why does this matter? There's something called the Fugitive Slave Clause. We'll get there in a few minutes, which allowed the slave trade to happen across the Atlantic. That could be repealed by statute. Would that be repealed if the Southern states had full representation? No, it would not. So in a way, the 3/5 clause was a compromise, and it's described that way, but it's not the way you think. It was to allow the Northern states to have more representation and perhaps one day come closer to an end of slavery. Okay. Number 7, numeration clause. This is about the census. Anyone ever felt the census form? It's every 10 years. Hey, you should ignore it. It's how you know how many people you have. Okay. How do you allocate the representation? No more than one for every 30,000 people. So currently the House has how many members? Oh, no? 435. Very good. That's not a very large number for a nation of 300 million people. So you see very often that you don't know who your representative is, he represents a lot of people, and so on. We could increase the House, but that's been done in many, many, many years. When there's a vacancy in the House, there's a special election that's held. The governor cannot fill a temporary vacancy in the House. The House can choose the representatives and their speaker. We just had a speaker vote in Congress last week and a speaker vote in the Texas House yesterday. Who was following that news? Okay. Now, what's impeachment? Now, people don't always get this. Impeachment is a two-step process. Think of an impeachment as like charging someone with a crime. We are charging with a crime, and then there's a trial. So impeachment happens in the House. Okay, the House has sole power in impeachment. The trial happens in the Senate. We saw that twice in the last couple of years. We'll probably see it again in 2 years or so. Teaching ConLaw is a fun class. Always different every year. Okay, Article 1, Section 3. This is about the Senate. Now, the House is based on population. Virginia has a lot of representatives, and Delaware has like 1. But the Senate is equality of suffrage. Equal votes. Every state has 2 senators, no matter how big or small it is. This was the Connecticut Compromise. How do you make Virginia and Delaware agree on anything? This was the deal. Virginia had more votes in the House, but there's only 2 votes in the Senate, and also they serve 6-year terms. So they serve longer, considered more moderate. Also, the Senate was not elected by the people. It was elected by who? The state legislatures. This was a federalism provision. The states would choose who would go to the capital. Okay. This is a clause about what happens when how the first batch of senators were allocated. It's actually kind of a fun math question. Senators, your math, you need to be 30 years old and 9 years a citizen. Just a fun fact. Let's see. The Constitution was ratified 1788. 1788. Who was a citizen of the United States for 9 years in 1788? When did citizenship begin? Before the Constitution was ratified? Declaration of Independence? It's actually a good question. Constitution does not define citizenship. We don't get to citizenship till the Civil War of what citizenship actually means. Core element of Dred Scott. We'll get there later this semester. Okay. And then we have this thing called the vice president. Now, the vice president has been described as the most useless position in history, right? It doesn't really do anything much. It's been described as a bucket of spit, right? Now, one of the only jobs for the VP is to serve as the president of the Senate, as the presiding officer of the Senate. And if the Senate ties, the VP can break the tie. Now, the real reason you're vice president is in case the president dies. I'm not exaggerating, right? It's just someone to wait around. The president dies. Okay, we got someone, vice president. But under the original Constitution, the president and VP did not run on a ticket together. They were opponents. So, for example, Thomas Jefferson and John Adams, they hated each other. But in 1796, Adams got the second most votes, and Jefferson got the most votes. I'm sorry, I flipped it. Adams got the most votes, and Jefferson got the second most votes. So who was president? Adams. The VP was Jefferson. They hated each other. We changed out the 12th Amendment. We'll get there in a bit. Okay.